So, good afternoon, Sardono and friends. Today we are from the second group will present about Marxist criticism. So, the definition of Marxist criticism is a type of literary criticism that concerns with differences in culture and society based on socioeconomic class and human structure, which explain about the ownership of human production. So for Marxism, all the social or political activities like education, science, media, etc. are done with purpose to keep and get the economic power, which is the base of the superstructure of social or political or ideological realities is built. So just a brief background about Marxism. Marxism was originated in the 19th century when Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, as a German philosopher, were arguing about historical circumstance when people divided themselves into two, which are the have or bourgeoisie and the have-not, which is the proletariat. So the have people, known as the oppressing, as the owner of the capital and the one who gets access to the means of production, different with the proletariat, which is the oppressed, who is an ordinary worker who doesn't have and can only offers labor as an employee. So, few Marxists still believe that someday the proletariat will rise up in violent revolution against the oppressor to create a classless society. But if we take a look at the class system of America on the PDF Sardono shared to us, we can see that the author want to try seeing the class struggle in American society from the Marxism perspective. People find it difficult to differ who is the proletariat or who is the bourgeoisie because there are some owners of company who get the smaller profit than the sales person working for a big corporation. Therefore, people start to identify society according to their socio-economic lifestyle. So, at the first position, which is the lowest, is underclass or homeless, who only have little hope of improvement by using their material possession. And the second one is lower class or the poor, who keep themselves struggling and living in fear of becoming the homeless. And on the third position is middle class or the financial established, who own comfortable home, car, and can afford to pay for their children's studies. And the fourth one is upper class or the well-to-do, who are able to buy more expensive homes, several cars, and other luxury items or properties. And for the last one, which is the highest class, is aristocracy or the extremely wealth, who are economically privileged, own the well-established companies, and who are not worrying about any economic recession. So those are the 5 class system of America this day. So some people might be curious about why don't the oppressed try to fight back, or what keep them stay in their class. So the book says that this situation is likely affected by an ideology existing in America. But before we go further about it, we need to know that nowadays there are many assumptions that people believe as an ideology. Some people think that men are physically, intellectually, and emotionally stronger than women is a statement that considered as an ideology. But the fact is, we still don't know, or we can stuck in one statement or ideology that we believe it is true, because we still need to learn more about those statements. So, for example, Marxism analyzed more detail about ideology existing in America named American Dream, which state about financial success is the result of initiative and hard work, which is followed by a statement about we are all born equal from the US Declaration of Independence. So the thing is, or the problem is, how can people be sure that everyone is born equal? What about people from underprivileged family who don't have any access to the means of production as simple or as easily as people from the rich family? So if we take a look at at what happened to the proletariat people in reality, we can conclude that actually people are not born equal. The oppressed find it difficult to upgrade their socio-economic class because not everyone gets a chance to reach the ideal of American dream. So the reason why the oppressed can easily jump up to the middle class or the higher class is not because they are lazy or effortless, but it is because the fact that not everyone can obtain the same opportunities. In brief, American Dream is an ideology which is illustrated as the big box sweepstakes or lottery contest that anyone can win but not everyone can get. So that's all for me. Thank you for listening and we will move to another part.
Okay, next I will discuss the role of ideology. In these topics, I will divide it into three subtopics. The first one, I will discuss Marxist perspective of others' ideologies, and will be continued with the definitions of each ideology. And the last part, I will tell the goal of Marxist criticism. Okay, the first one we will discuss about the Marxist perspective of others' ideologies. From a Marxist perspective, the role of ideology in maintaining those in power is so important that we should briefly examine a few more examples so that we can see how it works. The ideologies that we will discuss divided into five. The first one, classism, patriotism, religion, work individualism, and the last one, consumerism. Let's us talk the first ideology. Okay, so classism is an ideology that equates one's value as a human being with the social class to which one belongs. For example, the higher one's social class, the better one is assumed to be. It is because the quality is in the blood that is inborn. We can take a look in a simple example such as Bakri's family. They are already have the high social class in Indonesia, which we as a citizen see them very superior. We see them superior because they are the rich family in Indonesia. But for classist perspective, people at the top of social scale are naturally superior to those below them. It is because those at the top are more intelligent, more responsible, more trustworthy, more ethical, and so on. Besides, people at the bottom of the social scale, it follows, are naturally shiftless, lazy, and irresponsible. Therefore, it is only right and natural that those from the highest social class should hold all the position of power and leadership because they are naturally suited to such role and are the only ones who can be trusted to perform them properly. Next, patriotism. Patriotism is an ideology that keeps poor people fighting wars against poor people from other countries, while the rich on both sides take in the profit of wartime economy. It is because patriotism leads the poor to see themselves as a member of nation, separate from other nations, rather than as members of a worldwide oppressed class opposed to all privileged classes, including those from their own country. It prevents the poor from banding together to improve their condition globally. Next, religion. Religion is an ideology that helps to keep the faithful poor satisfied with their lot in life, or at least tolerant of it, much as a tranquilizer might do. But religion in Marxist perspective is not like questioning God's existence, but it is more like what human beings do in God's name as the focus in Marxist analysis. For example, many Christian religious groups work to feed, clothe, house, and even educate the world's poor. The religious tenets that are disseminated along with the food and clothing include the conviction that the poor, if they remain non-violent, will find their reward in heaven. It is more like the Christian groups tell and let the poor people do like what the Bible lesson tell them to do. So they will get a lot. They will do many kindness. So in at the end of the day, when they are died, they can go to the heaven. Next is rugged individualism. Uh, individualism is an ideology that romanticizes the individual who strikes out alone in pursuit of a goal not easily achieved, a goal that often involves risk, and one that most people would not readily undertake. For example, today such a goal might be the undertaking of a high-risk business in which one risks losing all one's money. If we want to take a look in our social life, it's like when somebody try to do a trading, like during quarantine we might do such a thing like trading to get some money, but it is like take it or leave it. You will take the money or you will lose all your money because we become more selfish to achieve it rather than think about other people, or it can be another example like we in a teamwork. We have to work together. Not we do it all by ourselves just because they can fulfill our request like what we want. It's okay to be perfectionist, but we need to do some teamwork too. Next, the last one is consumerism. Consumerism, or shop till you dropism, is another cornerstone of the American dream. Consumerism is an ideology that says, I'm only as good as what I buy. Because of it, there are two ideological purposes. The first one, it gives me the illusion that I can be as good as the wealthy if I can purchase what they purchase, or a reasonable facsimile thereof, and it fills the offers of the wealthy who manufacture and sell the consumer products I buy and who reap the 15 up to 20% interest on my credit card bills. Consumerism it is now happen around us, especially during this quarantine. We see something on our social media, we immediately think like, I need to get it because everybody wear it and or everybody like it. I need to try this and I need to buy it. That's the simple example that I can give to make it more clear. Next, the last subtopics that I will discuss is the goal of Marxist criticism. These views are intended just to illustrate in general terms that Marxist view of repressive ideologies. The goal is to identify the ideology at work in cultural productions, such as literature, films, paintings, music, etc., and to analyze how that ideology supports or undermines the socio-economic system in which that cultural production plays a significant role. Okay, next I will talk about the relation between human behavior, the commodity, and the role of family in Marxist criticism. Karl Marx works mostly focus on economics, but he ever began as a student of human behavior, so he has a concern over the human being. Marx's concern over the rise of capitalist economy was a concern for the effect of capitalism on human values. In a capitalist economic system, an object's value becomes impersonal. Its value is translated into a monetary equivalent. The word capital means money and determined solely in terms of its relationship to a monetary market. In Anglo-European culture, capitalism replaced a barter economy in which labor or goods were exchanged for other labor or goods, depending on the abilities and the needs of the individuals involved in the exchange. Later, the focus of Marxists on the ways in which ideology is transmitted through popular culture and operates in our emotional lives is thus a natural extension of Marx's own interest in human behavior and experience. Of course, many Marxist insights into human behavior involve the damaging effects of capitalism on human psychology, and those damaging effects often appear in our relationship to the commodity. For Marxism, a commodity's value lies not in what it can do, but in the money or other commodities for which it can be traded, or in the social status it confers on its owner. For the example I took from this module, which is if we read a book for pleasure or for information, or even if we use it to prop up the table leg, the book has use value. But if we sell that same book, it has exchange value. Also, if we leave that book out on our coffee table just to impress someone else, it has science exchange value. In this module also, define commodification is the act of relating to objects or persons in terms of their exchange value or sign exchange value. For Marx, if he commodify human beings when he structures his relations with them to promote his own advancement financially or socially. Like we know it is means to treat a person like an object becomes a commodity, however, only when it has exchange value or sign exchange value. If the object has that two requirements, that means it already commodified it. Next, from a Marxist perspective, because the survival of capitalism, which is a market economy, depends on consumerism, it promotes sign exchange value as our primary mode of relating to the world around us. For example, it is like the fashion trend. We wear what makes us feel good, not like what people think it good on us. So in other words, in economic terms, it's in capitalism's best interest to promote whatever personal insecurities will motivate us to buy consumer goods. And because The kinds of personal insecurities that make us buy consumer products are produced by comparing ourselves with other people. Competing is promoted not just among companies who want to sell products, but among people who feel they must sell themselves in order to be popular or successful. Next, the capitalism that happens today is the way in which consciousness can be colonized by imperialist governments. The capitalism that happens today is the way in which consciousness can be colonized by imperialist government. To colonize the consciousness of subordinate people means to convince them to see their situation the way the imperialist nation wants them to see it, to convince them. For example, that they are mentally, spiritually, and culturally inferior to their conquerors, and that their lot will be improved under the guidance and protection of their new leaders. The example is where in America, when the African or the black people become a slave, some of the white people convince them that they are not a slave for the white people. But in reality, yes, they are a slave because it is the ancient culture that they have since a long time ago. Thus, the attempt to colonize consciousness can be practiced against us by our own culture. So, psychoanalysis focuses on the individual side and its formation within the family. Marxism focuses on the material or historical force. Clearly, Marxism concerned with human psychology overlaps with that of psychoanalysis. Both disciplines study human behavior and motivation in psychological terms. Psychoanalysis focuses on the individual side and its formation within the family. Marxism focuses on the material or historical forces such as the politics and ideologies of socio-economic system that shape the psychological experience and behavior of individuals and groups. That's the different things that Marxist concerned in this module. For Marxism, the family is not the source of the individual's psychological identity because for both the individual and the family are products of material or historical circumstances. The family unconsciously carries out the cultural program in raising its children, but that program is produced by the socio-economic culture within which the family operates. So, the Marxist critic will show us the ways in which family dysfunction are themselves products of the socio-economic system and the ideologies it promotes. For Marxism, the family is not the source of the individual's psychological identity, for both the individual and the family are products of material or historical circumstances. The family unconsciously carries out the cultural program in raising its children, but that program is produced by the socio-economic culture within which the family operates. So, the Marxist critic will show us the ways in which family dysfunctions are themselves products of the socio-economic system and the ideologies it promotes. That's all from me. Thank you.
Next, talk about Marxism in literature. First, contrasting psychoanalytic readings and Marxism using Arthur Miller's greatest familiar play, Death of a Salesman. Psychoanalytic reading of the play would focus on such elements as Willie's abandonment at a very young age by his father and older brother, Willie's insecurity, and the massive denial of reality that results. These aspects of the play would be of interest to psychoanalytic critics because they focus on the individual psyche as the product of the family. On the other hand, Marxists would focus on the ways in which the psychological problems listed above are produced by the material or historical realities within which the family operates. For example, the exploitative potential of the socio-economic system that doesn't require all companies to provide adequate pension coverage for their employees. Next, if Marxist critics use a psychoanalytic concept, it is used in service of Marxist interpretation, for example, Willis' denial of reality, and the regressive hallucination that accompany it would be viewed as evidence of the American dream's debilitating ideological agenda. Marxist critique is engaged in this constructive enterprise. Indeed, many Marxist critics are, among the other things, feminists, deconstructors, social psychologists, and cultural anthropologists. In every case, however, you will see that concepts overlapping with or borrowed from other fields are put in service of Marxist goals. As in every field, there is a great deal of disagreement among Marxist theorists and literary critics concerning, for example, the formation and the role of class solidarity among the proletariat, the role of the media in manipulating our political consciousness, the relationship between ideology and psychology, the compatibility of Marxism with other critical theories. However, the concepts provided in this chapter can be considered the basic principles, the main ideas you need to know in order to read Marxist theories and literary critics with some understanding of the issues they raise. Next, Marxism view of literature. For Marxism, literature doesn't exist in some timeless, aesthetic realm as an object to be passively contemplated. Rather, like all cultural manifestation, it is a product of socio-economic and hence ideological condition of the time and the place in which it was written, whether or not the author intended it so. Uh, there are two possibilities of interest to Marxist critics. The first one is the literary work might tend to reinforce the reader the ideologies it embodies. Second, it might invite the reader to criticize the ideologies it represents. Well, many texts do both, and it is not merely the content of literary work, the action or the theme that carries ideology, but the form as well, or as most Marxists would argue, the form primarily realism, naturalism, surrealism, symbolism, romanticism, modernism, postmodernism, tragedy, comedy, satire, interior monologue, stream of consciousness, and the other genres and literal devices are the means by which form is constituted. If content is the what of literature, then form is the how. For example, realism. Give us character and a plot as if we were looking through a window onto an actual scene taking place before our eyes. Our attention is drawn not to the nature of the words on the page, but to the action those words convey. For some Marxists, realism is the best form for Marxist purposes because it is clearly and accurately represents the real world, with all its socioeconomic inequities and ideological contradictions, and encourage readers to see the unhappy truth about material or historical reality. For whether or not authors intend it, they are bound to represent socioeconomic inequities and ideological contradictions if they accurately represent the real world. However, many Marxists believe non-realistic experimental fiction because the fragmentation of the experience it represents and the estrangement the reader often experience constitute a critique of the fragmented world and the alienated human beings produced by capitalism in today's world. To see how form affects our understanding of content, well, or how form is a kind of content, let's take another brief look at that of establishment. As we have seen, the play has a strong Marxist component in that it invites us to condemn the capitalist exploitation Willie suffers at the hand of his employer, and it shows us the contradiction inherent in capitalist ideology, which promotes the interests of big business at the expense of the little man, who has bought into capitalist value. However, for many Marxists, this anti-capitalist theme is severely undermined by the fact that the play is written in the form of tragedy. Although Marxists have long disagreed about what kinds of work are most useful for promoting social awareness and positive political change, many today believe that even those literary works that reinforce capitalist, imperialist, or other classes values are useful in that they can show us how these ideologies work to seduce or coerce us into collusion with their repressive ideological agendas. Marcella Frankenstein's, for example, may be said to reinforce classist values to the extent that it portrays those born into the upper class. The next is, for example, Alphonse Frankenstein, Elizabeth Lavenza, and the Deleuze, as morally and intellectually superior to those below them on the social scale. Characters at the bottom of the social ladder, on the other hand, are often depicted as rude, insensitive, and easily incensed to mob behavior. For in contrast, Tony's Morrison Blue Side undermines classist values by illustrating the injustice suffered under the class system imposed by the American capitalism in the early 1940s. In addition, by the revealing ways in which religion and escapism always harm the poor by encouraging them to ignore the harsh realities of their lives, rather than organize politically and fight collectively for their fair share of the pie. This novel can be said to have a Marxist agenda.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. So let us discuss from the PDF on page 68, and it's still related to Marxism. Actually, Karl Marx opposed the principles of capitalism. This aims to make workers aware that they have the right to be given the same facilities as their work. The focus is on the economic conditions, or also known as material conditions. Marxist analysis of the events and means of ownership of the human production. The work support in capitalism. Not all ideologies are equally productive or desirable. Unwanted ideologies promote a repressive political agenda, so maybe it's a little bit conflicted. In the US, there is a distinction between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie have, while the proletariat have not. The rich are getting richer, but the poor are getting poorer. In addition, the financial ability is divided into 5 classes. They are the lower class of America, the lower class, the middle class, the upper class, and the last one is the aristocracy. Perhaps it can be judged from the focus. African American people believe that the Christian faith works hard to help the poor and educate them. From the PDF file, the way to fight socio-economic oppression is by spreading Bible teachings and promoting some aspects of Christian belief. However, in fact, that Marxism and religion are still like a conspiracy and there is no certainty.
Okay, so now let's talk a bit about what do we know so far about Marxist literary criticisms, and these few points will all be, of course, a simplified view on Marxist literary criticism, and of course, it will be much better if we read the actual Marx writings. But I think personally, at the very least, this will be a good starting point, kind of like a rule of thumb for those who are interested in reading more about Marxist literary criticism or even Marxism in general as a whole. First thing first, we need to remind ourselves that Marxism is a scientific theory of human societies and of the practice of transforming them. And this is why, according to basically Marxist literary criticism, treats the narrative as something which basically has to deliver the struggles of men and women alike to free themselves from certain forms of exploitation and oppressions. And this is also why previously we talked a lot about the role of ideology, and because understanding ideology is basically understanding the past and also the present, which will contribute to the liberation of human from such oppression. And the second, there is a difference between Marxist literary criticism and sociology of literature. Sociology of literature is generally concerned about literary productions, distribution, and their exchange within society. For example, like how books are published, social determinants of taste, literacy rates, and how literary text is relevant from sociological point of view. However, Marxist literary criticism is more than this. It does not concern itself with, with whether certain literary texts mention the working class struggles and so on. What Marxist literary criticism do, in essence, is paying close attention to things like forms, styles, meanings, and even further understanding these forms, styles, and meanings as the products of particular history. And as Terry Eagleton brilliantly puts it, it's not about a historical approach to literature like what sociology of literature does, but rather revolutionary understanding of history. And the third one is understanding the base and superstructure as Marxian ontology. So this is how Marx puts it in the preface of contribution to the critique of political economy about the relationship between base and superstructure. So in the social production of their existence, men inevitably enter into definite relations which are independent of their will, namely relations of production appropriate to a given stage in the development of their material forces of productions. The totality of these relations of productions constitutes the economic structure of society, the real foundation on which rise legal and political superstructure, and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. The mode of productions of material life conditions the general process of social, political, and intellectual life. It is not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but their social existence that determines their consciousness. Understanding base and superstructure is essential because these are the foundation to Marxian ontology, the historical materialism, and also dialectical materialism, the Marxian epistemology. Important because every now and then, once you are already familiar with the concept of historical materialism, you will hear so much about the reductionist view, which treat especially this last part as only the reversal of mainly Hegelian philosophy, saying that since Marx basically thought that the material determines the mental, then explanation on superstructure then is nothing more than a mere epiphenomenon, like the side effects of the economic structure. And this is a problem because the question on base and superstructure is not of that kind of like not determinism, but rather a question of precondition. So understanding the relationship of base and superstructure require us to reconsider that within the Marxian history of thought, naturalism plays one of the most important role, basically in the nature as the precondition to man. So in short, for thing to exist, there must be material preconditions which precedes it. So kind of like the closed system in science, basically how biology are conditioned by chemistry, and chemistry are conditioned by physics and so on. Basically, for example, you can say that as humans, the biological entity cannot in any way exist unless at first there are interactions of atoms, molecules, compounds, basically chemistry and physics. And this is also how base and superstructure interact. So base as the absolute precondition to superstructure, although in turn superstructure can also change the base only so long it is within the boundaries only possible as the base permits. And last, that literature cannot be reduced to ideology but has particular relationship to it. Basically, art or literature as part of the superstructure needs to be demystified. So it's not some mysterious, miraculous ideas given simply to the heads of the author, but rather than it is also forms of perception, like how they see the world, and so relates to ideology.
And now let's talk about the Marxist reading on the novel The Great Gatsby. And so, one way to look at The Great Gatsby from a Marxian perspective is by analyzing how the capitalist ideology permeates within society. And this is done by the representation of commodification as the part or the nature of capitalism. So, commodification, in essence, is the process through which the elements of production and social reproduction are produced for and obtained from market exchange and subjected to its disciplines and compulsions. Within commodity, value is embedded not in what it actually do or the use value, but rather in terms of money or other kinds of commodities for which it can be traded or exchange value, and also social status granted to the owner of that particular commodity or sign exchange value. But unlike use value, exchange and sign exchange value are social. They are assigned by humans within certain social contexts. In practice, this is the act of relating things or even persons in terms of their assumed exchange value and sign exchange value. For example, how the ownership of, say, slaves back then signify the social status of the nobles. And how this commodification works in The Great Gatsby can be seen by looking through the characters from the novel, like Tom Buchanan. When we're looking at Tom, the wealthy man, the bourgeoisie, the capitalist, he sees the world through only his wealth, and how things and even people surrounding him are nothing more than a mere commodities aimed to please him. For Tom, women are commodities who possess exchange value and also sign exchange value. Take for example his marriage to Daisy, and Daisy here as a commodity is available for him to purchase at the price of a purse, or the other moments like Myrtle Wilson with whom he has affairs. Within capitalism itself, commodification of women isn't something unheard of. In fact, it serves as one of the foundations or the social foundation of capital accumulation, which made possible by the emergence of the notion of private property. Within capitalism, women are demoted to the possessor of social reproduction, doing the unpaid labor like that of domestic work, becoming the private property of men, and in addition to them also being the active production forces of wage labor. And one of the irony of commodification is that it creates desire as it fulfills it. So basically, you cannot just simply be thankful of what you have. Like, you always desire more. You want to accumulate wealth more, and you can never rest easy in your belongings. And this commodification promotes some kinds of sense in which you don't if you don't purchase the latest thing, or if you don't follow the latest trend, even if you don't actually need it, you will feel inferior to others. And in Tom's case, this inferiority comes from being born in the East, in the old money, and this is shown in the vulgarity of his behavior, how he glorifies his belonging to the supreme Aryan race, and of course how he sees people as commodities whose sole objective is to benefit him. And this is done solely to assure of him the social stratum. And even the seemingly charming character like Jay Gatsby is not exempt from this question on commodification, and as the representation of the successful rags to riches people made possible by the promise of American dream during the Roaring Twenties, he serves as the reminder that even American dream does not provide the basically the moral alternatives to the old money portrayed within character like Buchanan. And in fact, the new money produced the exact commodification of things and persons like that of the old money. You can see this from a few lines used in the novel. So basically, for Gatsby, the wealth in his possession is deprived of uh, every use value and instead only serves as possessing sign exchange value. All those wealth only serves as means to an end, acquiring the commodity of ultimate science exchange value, that is Daisy Buchanan. Just as Tom does, um, Gatsby also accumulates wealth in order to satisfy his desire of social status. So if he ever gotten Daisy, this means that he would cement his socioeconomic status and launders his new money and make it similar to the old money. Another way how ideology works, in this particular case, the capitalism repressive ideology, can be seen from characters like Nick Carraway, and we all know how he condemns the moral decadence apparent in wealthy people, and yet, as we can all see in the novel, he still retains basically his romanticized view towards Jay Gatsby. He doesn't cancel him as much as he despises Buchanan's family, for example, and he's already actually, in fact, charmed right at the start from the novel. And this goes to show that the how American Dream as the ideology which sustains the capitalism embodied in the successful story of J. Gatsby permeates within Nick Carraway, seduced by the promises of the Roaring Twenties, which can happen to everyone as long as you work for it. Aside from Nick, it is also shown in the problem of unsympathetic representation of Myrtle and Josh Wilson. Um, as we all know, one of the most basic functions of ideology is that it provides false consciousness which divert us from reality. In this case, how both Myrtle and Josh Wilson are portrayed using negative stereotypes usually assigned to members of the lower class, something like uncultured, uneducated swine. So what follows as the consequences is similar to the problem of secondary victimization, and because we are diverted, or should I say most likely unconsciously forced to overlook the socio-economic realities of people in the lower class like the Wilsons, we tend to blame them for not having what it takes to pull themselves from poverty, like Gatsby does so in the novel, and we never see them as the victim of class oppression, basically showing the illusion of equal opportunity in the American dream. We know that within capitalist society, those who are deprived from the access to the ownership of the means of production don't really have the choice than to sell labor and be exploited. And in the novel of The Great Gatsby, Myrtle and George Wilson, out of fear of Valley of Ashes, do what they can only do in order to survive. So basically, they don't have any choice except then letting them be exploited by the Buchanans.
Okay, so this part is for the discussion from the PDF file on page 79. This background story is taken after the American Civil War, and it was written in 1930. Emily could be considered as a traditional Southern belle, a woman who represents the Old South aristocracy. Emily, in her entire life, was forced to live in a manor due to her father's expectation regarding social status. There was not strife between races. Faulkner was concerned with Southern aristocrats solely due to Estelle Oldham, whose father refused William as a sweetheart. He used the story to expose the African American problem of social inequality and the lack of equality education for the black children. The theme of the story is about appearance, class, equality, shame, and education too. Maybe we can learn that we should not judge other people by being racist. What I mean racist in here is do not differentiate between black people and the white people. Black people also have rights and equality like white people, and all of the human beings are same. Every people also have rights to achieve their education. The theme of the story are humankind, family, cruelty. The Great Depression and its consequences were caused by society. The local and landowners are cruel to migrants in an attempt to keep their own power. There is also a division between poor and rich. They desire to maintain their status. George's family survives together and helps the other people. In the ending part, there is a difference between the novel and film adapted version. The movie was censored because some scenes are unacceptable. In the novel, it ends with a call to action and indicates the struggle continued. But in the film, it has a happy ending. Instead of ending the story as in the novel, with a violent strike followed by a dismal plea for life, the film ends with the happy discovery of a clean camp run by the Department of Agriculture. The storm is actually interpreted as a sexual desire, a topic that not publicly discussed in the 19th century. The story also leads to an affair due to lack of excitement from a marriage. There are some subtle class differences between the four main characters represented in the storm, and here is the paragraph that I found. Alcée and his wife Clarice are Creoles, descendants of French settlers in Louisiana. Calista and her husband Bobinot are Acadians, descendants of French-American exiles from Acadia, Nova Scotia. From this story, we can learn that Christ was the only person to treat him with equality. This is a powerful symbol. Jesus tells Sargon in his dream sequence, "They have kept me nailed on a cross for nearly 2,000 years." Indeed, Jesus is the most powerful symbol for both religion of Christianity and also Christian ideals. What it symbolizes is that Jesus' message is not being properly followed by a church whose leader will do nothing to help a man based on the color of his skin.